Hey everybody, my name's Mike Montgomery, and today I'm gonna be showing you how to build this fake concrete and wood bench/planter on Modern Build. We're starting by cutting the 2x4s for the planters on either side of the bench. I'll be using my circular saw paired with my speed square to make sure I get good 90-degree cuts, and I've got to batch out quite a few pieces. We'll do 8 at 23.5, and then 8 at 15 inches long, and 8 more at 13.5. And this will create our planter box frame. Before assembling my 2x4 frames, I pre-drilled holes where I'll be screwing them together. This will just make everything easier and prevent the ends of the boards from splitting. Each planter is going to need one frame assembled with the 2x4s on edge like this. They'll also need one more assembled with the 2x4 face down on the top and bottom. And that's what you see me screwing together now, making sure everything was square as I went. And now on all of my 13.5 inch long pieces, I'm gonna use my Craig Rebel pocket hole joiner to drill holes for pocket screws on the ends of each of these boards where they'll be connecting. This new pocket hole joiner from Craig is new, but I've been getting a lot of use out of it lately. After all of my holes were drilled, I got one of each type of the two frames that I made, and then used these horizontal supports to connect them together. And you can see that I had a clamp holding everything in place while I screwed these. The reason there's two different sized frames is I want an armrest next to the bench, but the outside edge to be thinner. That's one planter box complete, and now I just need to make a second that looks the exact same. If you wanted to add glue to all of these butt joints before you screwed them in, it would make everything super strong, but I figured with cement board and the mortar going down, we should totally be good. And really quick, I just want to show you how these planters will be situated. I've got the thin wall on the outside end and this thicker piece where the armrest is gonna sit. We'll have a little bit more than 4 feet of bench right here in between the two planters. I want the top of my 2x4 bench platform to be 18 inches off of the ground. So I'm measuring 5.5 inches off of the top of each of my planter legs, and that's where the top of the board will go. Now these 2x4 stretchers connecting the planters are gonna hold the weight of whoever is sitting on the bench, and that's why I added wood glue everywhere these join. I clamped it in place, making sure that everything was sitting 90 degrees, and then screwed it from the face as well as the back of the stretcher. I repeated the same process on the back stretcher, and before I worry about making the face of the bench flush with the face of the planters, I added some cross supports that'll keep this square and sure everything up. These cross supports are also what our deck boards you'll sit on will screw down into. And now I'm cutting a couple of 2x4s to length so that I can screw these onto the face of our bench and make everything flush. This will make our cement board and thin set process way easier. It's also gonna make this bench super heavy duty. That's strong. I don't want any flex because that could cause our fake concrete finish to crack and fail. And if I did this right, it should be sturdy. I think that'll work. So now let's move on to our next step, wrapping this frame in 1/2 inch cement board. These Durock sheets are 3x5 and they cost about 11 bucks. And one thing that's neat about cement board is all you need is a utility knife to cut it. With a straight edge, I'll score it on the face a few times and then flip it over and it should snap right along our score line. Pretty easy. There's also a specialty scoring tool that you can use for cement boards so you don't just burn through utility knives. But for a small project like this, it's totally not necessary. I'll probably go through 2 or 3 blades. So now that you know what we're doing, I'm gonna do a quick cutting montage because I've already written out my cut list. So I'm gonna get everything done in one swoop. And if you want a full, complete cut list along with some basic plans, I'll make sure and leave that linked down in the description. You can get them from modernbuilds.com. One thing I will note though is that you really don't want to cut any of this cement board with a spinning blade. If you do, it's going to create crazy dust. If you've got to make any custom cuts or curves, a jigsaw is best. It keeps the dust down to a minimum. And finally, we're on our final 2 pieces. These are small ones, and I'm just gonna score them, flip it, and snap them. And that really didn't take too long, but we've got our 14 pieces of cement board ready to install. And installation is gonna be really simple. I'll use these cutoffs to make sure that my overhang is consistent and square on all 4 sides. And to secure everything down, I'll be using these 1 5/8 inch cement board screws. I spaced my screws out in rows of about 9 or 10 inches. And if you've ever done drywall work, then cement board is similar. You want to make sure and screw everything down without recessing the screw head too much, because that could cause your cement board to pop out, kind of like drywall. You don't want to damage the face. The reason I'm using cement board is this a stable substrate for this thin set mortar to go onto. If it was applied to something like plywood or MDF, it would swell with moisture and changing in the season, but this should be stable and prevent cracking. One planter down, let's do the same to the other side. I cut my pieces so that vertically there would be about 1/8 of an inch separating the cement board from the ground. I don't want this making direct contact. After the planters were complete, all I needed to do was add this 4-inch wide strip to the front and the back of the bench, and we were ready for the next step. And next, I need to make the openings in the top of each of my planters. I'm gonna measure in 2.5 inches on these 3 outside edges, and then on the inside edge, I'm gonna measure 4.5 inches wide, and this will create our armrest for when you're sitting on the bench. To get access with the jigsaw, I drilled out a 3/8 inch hole and just followed the line that I had made. And I really sped this footage up. I noticed that if I moved quickly, I got a lot of tear out with this jigsaw, but if I moved slowly, I really didn't get much. And I'll leave a link down in the description for a jigsaw blade that's made for cutting cement board and other kind of hard material. And this mesh I'm using is made specifically for cement board, even though it pretty much looks the same as what you use for drywall. I'm gonna apply this to every corner and every seam that we've got, and this will prevent our mortar from cracking. Another thing I want to leave a link to in the description is some 4-inch wide cement board tape. It's on Amazon, and I don't think you can pick that up in store at Home Depot, or at least I didn't see it, but it seems handy. Tape complete. Now it's time to install our thin set. And I already told you I'm not using concrete. Instead, we're using this white thin set mortar. This is the exact same stuff that I used on my fire pit, and you want to mix it up and then let it set for about 5 minutes before stirring it up one more time before you use it. We're looking for something stiff like peanut butter. Oh, and that's nice. You want it to be stiff to where it can stick on your finger without falling off. I guess normally I would start with the top, but I want to start with one of the big front faces, and I'm just gonna lay it down flat so I'm not fighting gravity. In my last video, the DIY fire pit, I came out with a pretty good method of making sure this thin set spreads and then is able to be flattened out. After I've got the surface coated with plenty of thin set, I then go back with my square notch trowel at a 45-degree angle, and I remove the excess material. Then I can switch to the flat side and just give medium pressure to make sure I don't have any voids between my stripes. And on the other hand, if you're using too much pressure, it's easy to notice. You'll have a lot of squeeze out at the end of your pull. And I think it's important to note that on this first coat, we are not striving for perfection. Instead, we just want to do a build coat, knowing that with coat number 2 and 3, everything's gonna end up looking super fresh. And that's one thing that's cool about this project. You don't have to be very good with a trowel. This is far from an A+ finish, but we're gonna be sanding down our high points and backfilling any negative spaces. Adding the mortar to the front of the bench was a little messy because it kept spilling over the sides, but the square notches kept this at the same height and blended with the planters nicely. Now I can lift this back up, and you can see what I meant. It's not a perfect flat finish. If anything, I'd give it a B, maybe a B-, but we're gonna get to an A+. It seems like almost every time I mix thin set, it's a little bit thinner than what I want for a vertical surface. In these time-lapse shots, you can kind of see it starting to droop on me before I spread it out with the smooth trowel. This mix worked fine, but on the next batch, I added a little bit less water. And you'll notice that I did use the square notches on the vertical faces of the planter, whereas I didn't do that on the fire pit. And after doing both, I found that I got a marginally better result by using the square notches, but it just took a little bit extra time. Both work fine though. Just remember, we're trying to build up about 1/4 of an inch of thin set with this first coat. We're not trying to get it super smooth. And some of the corners are a little ugly, but I would rather them be built up to sand down rather than have a negative space. And I think we are now complete. We're gonna let this dry overnight and I'll sand tomorrow. And here is what it looked like in the morning so that you guys can see just how messy this looks before I sand it smooth. And FYI, I'm using 150 grit here. I know some projects involving a lot of trowel work are intimidating, but because thin set sands so easily, I think it's a really beginner-friendly project. And after sanding for a second, I switched to this Diablo Sand Net sandpaper, which I think I was kind of using for the first time. I had a little bit of red pigment from the Diablo sandpaper I was using transfer onto the planer where I was sanding where it wasn't fully cured. Thankfully, this removed any of that red or pink hue, and it also sanded any of those thick built-up sections without transferring any red onto it. Moving on. On the first coat, I really thought it was convenient laying this whole thing on its back so that I could do this whole surface flat. This is also gonna be a build coat, and the goal is to make it to where none of this mesh shows through once we sand this one back. I'll keep this held at a 45-degree angle and try not to spill like that. What can I say? I'm messy. And now we're back to the flat side with light medium pressure. I had a little bit of practice, so I was able to get these faces a little bit smoother, and the corners are easier to take care of now that the mesh tape doesn't occasionally try and float or tear away on you. And I hadn't mentioned this yet, but the square notch trowel I'm using is a 1/2 inch square notch trowel. This seems to give a good, thick, but still manageable coat. And on this second coat, I devised a little bit better way of how to round over the corner on the top so I didn't have as many negative spaces or big clumps. And this is where I should probably say, I'm really experimenting a lot with this project, but if you've got any helpful tips, I'd really appreciate them, so please leave them in the comments down below. I waited about 8 hours for this second coat to dry, and then I sanded everything smooth. It was mostly cured, but I still knew I had to do a third coat, so I wasn't too worried. Everything was still able to sand really smooth, and I wasn't scared of transferring red pigment anymore. Man, it's dusty. But coat number 2 looks awesome. I'm gonna need to do a third coat, just touching up some of these corners and a couple of negative spaces that I've seen. I'm not trying to cover the entire planter or bench. I wanna make sure that I'm squaring off all of these corners and backfilling any negative spaces. The reason I wanted to do a spot check for the third coat is because on the fire pit, I did a skim coat over the entire project for that third coat. I knew that took a lot longer than spot checking would, but I didn't know if after sanding, you would notice where I applied this third coat and where there were only 2 coats in other places. And well, it turns out after I sanded this third coat, once it had dried, you could tell where I had done those little spot checks. It wasn't too dramatic, but if I did this project again, I probably would have skim coated the entire project on this third coat so that no one would be able to see that. And as you can tell, I'm not using the random orbit sander anymore. I just wrapped a sheet of 150 grit around a wood block. Once I was happy with how smooth everything was, I applied 2 coats of this clear outdoor concrete sealer. That looks awesome. I love seeing this little bit of aggregate, these little black pebbles showing through. This product really soaks in on the first coat, but on the second, it really started to create more of a film finish, waterproofing. And while this is curing, I'm gonna start working on the wood slats that people are gonna sit on. But first, I wanna give a big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's episode. Squarespace is your one-stop shop to build your own website or online store. And now with Squarespace's cutting-edge design tools like Blueprint AI, that has never been easier. All you've got to do is tell Blueprint AI a little bit about the brand and website you want to create, and then you get a custom designer-level template that you can edit from there. Another cool thing is Squarespace's integrated SEO tools. They do all the complicated back-end work to make sure you show up more often on search engines, leading leading to more clients. And with Squarespace Invoices, you can impress those clients with on-brand invoices and streamline your workflow from proposals to contracts to invoices and seamless online payments all in one place. And finally, with Squarespace email campaigns, you've got the tools you need to engage your clients, promote your services, and build your business built in. So to learn more, make sure and follow my link down in the description. That's squarespace.com/modernbuilds. And don't forget to use my code ModernBuilds for 10% off your first site, store, or domain through Squarespace. Big thanks to Squarespace. Now let's cut some wood. To make this bench seat, I'm gonna be using 1x6 thermally treated ash. I need to cut these pieces just heavy of 53¼ inch using my speed square and circular saw. And then I'm gonna use my table saw to rip these down so that all 4 boards for this top are the same width. I used that SandNet sandpaper again on these boards and it worked awesome. It's definitely more aggressive than traditional sandpaper. And then I applied some paste wax. I applied a heavy coat and allowed it to soak before wiping off the excess and buffing it to a nice finish. And next, it was time to pre-drill holes everywhere I wanted to use screws to attach this to the bench. I'm reusing this drill guide from a previous project at Reset Hotel, some pool deck loungers using this same lumber. I don't want any big visible screw heads, so I use these exterior rated trim screws. And this wood is super dense, so if I did this again, I would have countersunk all of these so they would have sat a little more flush. Let's see how heavy this is. Oh, it's not light. That feels like 20 pounds heavier than the fire pit. 150? My guess is like 160 pounds. Not too bad. We'll go this way a little bit to center it in the pergola opening, even though it's offset the window a tad. But dang! This looks awesome. Time to add plants. But first, I needed to remove the 2x4s that we had stuck onto the bottom of this when we were applying mortar. Oh dang, that reveal is really nice. Just a shallow like 1/8 inch off the ground. And I just used this 2-gallon bucket to raise the plant I'm putting in here. And the plants I'm going with are these really pretty fig trees. They're the perfect height, they look awesome, and they're not too wide that they get in the way of the bench. Ooh dang, this touch of green is exactly what I wanted. To finish everything off, I made this quick plywood removable top that I could then add Mexican beach pebbles to make this look totally built in. And with that, our project is done. Once again, I think we nailed it with this faux concrete or fake concrete thin set mortar. This finish reminds me a lot of what you would see at a restaurant or some kind of patio bar. The contrast between the rich dark wood and that light thin set mortar is killer. And our plants just fit awesome. They're not in the way and have a little room to grow. I won't lie, I wish it was this high, I'll be honest. Still, cool to have a place to set a wine glass. And now with the matching fire pit, this awesome pergola, we're building a real cool back deck space. One thing I am very curious about is the durability of this thin set with a waterproof finish outside. All of the blogs that I read before building my fire pit said it would totally work and hold up fine. But I guess time is the only way to find out, so if this ever goes bad, I'll let you know down in the comments or some kind of follow-up video. And speaking of that fire pit, if you want to watch the video, it's sitting right there, and I love the way that these two match. We're really getting a high-end, modern feel here on the back porch. I really appreciate you all for watching. Make sure and like, comment, and subscribe with that little notification bell, and we'll see you next time on Modern Builds. Bye. Oh, and I got some lava rocks for the fire pit. I really hope you guys are enjoying these outdoor DIYs. I know I sure have. Bye again. Whoa.